We're trying to see if it is indeed possible to taper a Ponzi scheme, and we know it's not, so this will blow up if they keep trying to shrink the money supply, and there's nothing on the horizon that makes it look like they're going to do anything different than they have for the past year.
The Financial Survival Network. Now more than ever.
And welcome. You are listening to watching the Financial Survival Network. I'm your host, Kerry Lutz. Well, John Rubino is with us. We have a lot of great news. John, we've got the, seems like it's the annual debt ceiling kabuki dance. I sent you a thing about where kabuki, that term applying to politics, came from. And it was actually started during JFK. And he had all those eggheads, they called them, the intellectuals running stuff. And they said that they were basically kabuki dance, a lot of noise, a lot of dancing, and nothing really happening. And that's what our debt drama is like, right?
Every single time. Hey, Kerry. Yeah, they've done this so many times. I think that the number is literally 100 times that they've raised the debt ceiling.
78 times.
Okay. And, there's always some drama beforehand because that was the point of the law. It was to make it hard to increase the government's debt. But it's become impossible to cut government debt or even to stop the increase, slow the increase.
Yeah.
So now there's the law has just become this weird thing that gives everybody a chance to posture over, and then is basically just pushed off to the side, and they do away with this year's limit, or they raise this year's limit. And just let me say, the correct debt limit is 0 for central governments. There should be no such thing as government debt. But we're so far beyond that now that, see, that's for the reset. That's for later when we build something new out of the rubble of this system, because there's no way in this system that government debt stops increasing or even slows down. It has to accelerate from here for various reasons. Yeah.
Not to mention that our monetary system is, our currency is a debt-based currency. Every dollar in existence has been borrowed into existence. So you can't slow it down, because once you have less dollars kicking around, nobody can afford to pay their debt like we're seeing now. And then bankruptcies come, but you can't have too much of the money creation, or then you have what we have now with huge inflation and no way to put it back in the genie back in the bottle, right?
In other words, it's a Ponzi scheme. It needs new money to come in continuously and in an ever-increasing stream in order to cover the bad things that have happened in the past, all the bad debt that's out there that will blow up unless there's new money to refinance that debt. And at the same time that this is happening, we are decreasing the money supply. The M2 money supply is now down over the past year, which it hasn't been for as far back as the chart goes. So we're trying to taper a Ponzi scheme, which we can't do. So we're running experiments in every aspect of modern life right now, but this is a big one. We're trying to see if it is indeed possible to taper a Ponzi scheme, and we know it's not, so this will blow up if they keep trying to shrink the money supply, and there's nothing on the horizon that makes it look like they're going to do anything different than they have for the past year.
Hey, and in a traditional Ponzi scheme, the people who cash in their chips earliest win, because they get their profits and they get out. In this situation, I guess the people who opted out of the fiat-based monetary system, they're going to be the winners.
Well, that's what you want to do towards the end of a Ponzi scheme. You want to cash out and you want to put your money in a safe place. So the people who are, Bill Gates buying 1 million acres of farmland, that's one idea, that's an idea. And all the stackers out there who are buying gold and silver coins, that's another idea. Those are ways of cashing out of a Ponzi scheme. And you need to find your way, whatever it is that makes you comfortable. You need to move your dollars into those assets, things that cannot be inflated away, because the Ponzi scheme is going to collapse at some point, because debt has to increase because the the baby boomers are retiring, if for no other reason. We've got this huge wave of people who are going to collect on Social Security and Medicare now.
You and I, basically, John.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and we're going to be incredibly expensive because a lot of us didn't take very good care of ourselves. You did, Kerry, and I kind of am trying to. But the average boomer, liver disease, heart disease, joint replacements. It's going to be this litany of $100,000 operations and treatments for as far as the eye can see. It's going to cost us a fortune, which we are obligated to pay for. Which means the government has to borrow more and more money year after year. And that's in addition to all the other crazy stuff that the government's obligated to do.
Mm-hmm.
So government debt has to increase, which means the money supply has to increase at an equal or greater rate to keep the system from blowing up. And right now it's not. Right now, government debt is soaring while the money supply is shrinking. So we're headed for this brick wall, this financial brick wall out there. And there doesn't seem to be any way to avoid it because the Fed cannot start cutting interest rates yet. And the government can't slow down its borrowing. So there's no real way to get the money supply growing again in any meaningful way. So, start looking for things to short. Well, that's the other way to play a collapsing Ponzi scheme. Is you actively bet against it. You don't leave it and take your assets and go somewhere else. You bet on the main Ponzi assets going down, and that day is coming. I mean, I think it's actually a good time to be starting to short for sure. I've got some S&P 500 and some NASDAQ shorts, which one of them is doing okay lately, and the other one's not. And then I've got offers in to short the home builders, which ought to be one of the big casualties of a collapsing financial Ponzi scheme here. So we'll see. But you would think that with house prices where they are right now, interest rates where they are right now, and the money supply shrinking, that the supply or the demand for new houses is going to shrink going forward, which will crush the home builders. We'll see. That's the thesis, though, and my offers haven't been taken yet, but that's what I'm trying to set up. That's the trade I'm going for now.
Okay. Do you know anything about leaps? Those are long-term put calls, so they're called like long-term appreciation something or other. I can't remember what LEAP stands for, but you could go multi-year, whereas your standard options are only good for, you could go years with options, but the far out options are very lightly traded, not liquid.
Yeah, that's what I normally do. But yeah, the illiquidity is an issue out there because sometimes the premiums get so crazy. I think we've talked about this where I tried to short Tesla with long-term options, and Tesla did go down, but not enough to eat all the way through the gigantic premium on those options. So that's a thing to pay attention to.
Okay.
And I'm just trying to flat out short the home builders just by selling the stocks without owning them. But that ties up a lot of cash. You have to have enough in your account to cover, a wide range of resulting outcomes for something like that. With options, that's not an issue, but you got to pay a high premium. So the thing you're shorting has to drop quite a bit before the option really works for you. So nothing's perfect, but get it right, and you can make a ton of money, especially with options. When an option goes your way, a 5-bagger is a very easy outcome, and a 10-bagger can happen so easily. So, it just depends. You have to pay attention to what you're buying and the terms of the contract. But if you're right, you can make a lot of money shorting things.
I think you could go do inverse ETFs for housing. There's a bear real estate ETF, and but they are dangerous because they could be highly leveraged. The other thing you could do is sell options or buy puts on the housing home builders ETF, which is HOMZ. So you could sell puts. You could buy puts on that. I should say.
Yes. Yeah. Now, the thing about those index ETFs is that their options don't usually go out that far. That's what I've noticed. I don't know if there's a rule, but you can get like a 1 year option, 1 year put option on something like that, but you can't go out 2.5 years.
That's why your leaps are so good.
Yeah, because in 2.5 years, you better be right, or else your thesis was completely mistaken, you know?
And a leap
So-
is a long, I had it a second ago, a long-term equity anticipation security. How's that for a name, a leap? So you use the leaps, and you could use less capital than purchasing the shares. Obviously, that's the benefit of an option, and you get a lot more of the benefits of shorting a stock or owning it because they're long-term. They could go out for years.
Yeah. Yeah. So with an option, if you're right, you can be right very big. But if you're wrong, you lose everything you put into it. But you didn't put the full price of the stock into it. So your total loss is limited in that way. But everything has their issues. You know, they've got their upsides and downsides. And you have to understand the instrument that you're using to short to know if it's a good deal. So there's a lot to think about. But you know, I had a formative experience doing this in the Great Recession when the housing bubble burst. I got that kind of adrenaline rush of a gambler who has a streak of luck happen, you know, and I want that back. I've been craving that feeling ever since. So I think
you're a player.
yeah, I'm an addict. Maybe I need to take that drug you were talking about that eases addictions. Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So this could be the antidote to consumerism, because this drug, which you see it on TV, Ozempic, Wegovy, it's semaglutide, and what scientists, doctors have been finding, well, number one is that that it basically makes you lose weight because it gets rid of your hunger on several different levels. But one of them is that it somehow rewires your pleasure center. So when you eat that chocolate or that ice cream, the dopamine hit is smaller. You don't get the dopamine, and it's like, hey, if I can't get my dopamine, why bother? But what they found is it works with cigarettes with many people, in addition to weight loss, drugs, alcohol, and shopaholicism. So this could be the death knell to Amazon, to luxury brands, to all of that, right?
And how much you want to bet that the people who invented it have a unfortunate plane crash or something pretty soon, because the rest of big pharma is not going to be happy about this.
Well, they'll come up with an antidote. They'll just they'll find an mRNA vaccine that stops these GLP-1 agonists from cutting back on your urges for all the things that the society makes money off of your addictions from, right? It's a space race, a weapons race.
Oh, they're just manipulating us from every direction. Yeah. But you know, that's the big fear of the pharmaceutical industry, is a cure for things. You know, if somebody cured cancer today, $1 trillion of market cap would disappear from the drug industry.
And unemployment. You have doctors on the unemployment line.
Oh, yes.
Nurses, radiation technicians. I mean, the most profitable section of any hospital, I just read this recently, is the oncology department. They make more money off of chemo than anything else in that hospital. This is what I read. If I'm wrong, I'll stand corrected. Somebody corrected something, and I mentioned it a few weeks ago. If I'm wrong, I want to know, but I believe this to be true.
Well, and that's why they use chemo for every kind of cancer, even though it only works on a few kinds, because it's incredibly, it's expensive, it's high margin, and you can get away with throwing it at pretty much anything because there's no other treatment. So, yeah.
And look, there's millions of people alive today because of chemotherapy. We don't want to poo-poo it, but just follow the money and understand that that has created incentives that we would prefer not be in place?
Well, obesity might be in that league monetarily because right now, big food makes a fortune selling, pseudo foods to people
Yeah.
that throws their metabolisms out of whack, that makes them incredibly fat. Then those people go to the doctor, and instead of the doctor saying you need to lose 100 pounds or don't even come back here, they just give them drug after drug after drug to manage the symptoms of obesity.
Type 2 diabetes.
So yeah. So come up with a drug that cures obesity. And all of a sudden, you've got big food, big pharma, and a big chunk of the rest of the healthcare profession in bad shape right now. That would be a nice version of creative destruction, right? Capitalism at work in the best sense. It's putting a lot of bad actors out of business. If you close down half the pharmaceutical industry and most of the food processors, you've done a really good thing for society besides saving lives. So
yeah, but
we can hope. Yeah.
But John, if your food addiction comes from the same part of the brain as drugs, alcohol, cigarettes, and other things like shopaholism, whatever addictions, if all the addictions emanate from the same place, and you have a drug that, boom, gets rid of, just say it makes your addictions manageable. Like you only spend $200 a month on Amazon instead of $500. This is like really bad. They can't allow this because, look, addiction is a major profit center in modern capitalism. Like no one ever went broke, from people who were too addicted, right?
Well, that's why I said there was going to be an accident of some sort here, because this threatens if you threaten $2 trillion of corporate profits, you're dead. You're just going to die one way or another. That's all there is to it.
Accident.
Yeah.
Or a single car accident. You're driving down the highway.
Yeah, they'll be flying their private jet to Davos or something like that, and they'll go down over the Rockies. But it's.
You're so cynical, John. But I hate to say it, it's true. There's one that's even more effective than Ozempic or semaglutide, and that is tirzepatide, which basically you lose as much weight from that drug as you do from bariatric surgery. All right. So that means you got all these guys who are putting in bands, like the internal bands, external bands. They're like disconnecting your stomach, all of this. They're going to be out of work too. We could have a global depression, all because there's a drug that effectively treats addiction. And think of all the drug and alcohol counselors. They're going to be on the breadlines. And this wasn't even done by AI. When you put all that, nobody's going to be working. If we can end addiction through a drug and thinking through Chat GPT, we don't need anybody to work anything, to do anything, right, John?
I think this is going to be the decade of automation. Yeah, that's going to be a front page story day after day after day, because Chat GPT is eating into a really shockingly wide range of jobs. Apparently part of the writers' strike in Hollywood is driven by fears about automation. In other words, a computer writing screenplays better than a human can do it. That's, that always seemed like right at the edge of creativity, where no machine is going to be able to do dialogue, for instance, as well as Woody Allen or something like that. But apparently that's a fear now. So
Woody Allen in his early days, not in his later days. I think the AI could beat him in his later movies.
Yeah, but that's a very big deal. That's the kind of transition that we aren't prepared for, obviously, but we're going to have to creatively deal with to avoid it turning into this just gigantic catastrophe. Because a lot of people now are talking about how that's going to be the thing that makes UBI, Universal Basic Income, a feasible government policy. because so many people are going to be put out of work. Meanwhile, the people who own the automating technologies are going to be raking in such insane profits that we'll kind of have to tax the robots and then spread that money around to the people who are out of work with no prospect of getting back into their old careers because their old careers are gone. It's an intense decade or century or however long it takes. But it's a good thing you and I are untouchable.
Yeah, so far so good. No AI can do what I can do or you can do for now. But the way they're going, we'll be joining the rest on the sidelines. But think about this, John. All the fentanyl deaths, all the the deaths from food, from obesity, type 2 diabetes, all this, and then we have a drug that gets rid of all that. Not only will they have to give UBI, but life expectancy is going to go up. And so Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid already bankrupt, but it's going to be even worse than that because all these people are like you and me. If they figure out a drug and we can stick around for an extra 20 or 30 years, they're going to have to figure out a way to get rid of us. So maybe the idea of that plane accident on the way to the Bilderberg Group meeting, where all the creators of all these drugs ending addictions isn't too far a stretch, is it?
Yeah, but wouldn't that be just perfect for the boomers? We grew up in basically the best world that has ever been. And we had it our way all this time, and we own all the appreciated stocks and all the appreciated houses. And then they come out with some drug that gives us an extra 30 years of life.
Oh my God!
I think the Zoomers and the millennials are not going to think that's fair.
Hey, we'll have a civil war, and they'll just decide to kill off all the people 60 and over because you're just soaking up the. You're just taking, you're not contributing anything. You're just getting paid to not do anything.
But I think we own most of the guns, though. So we're liable to win the Civil War.
Yeah, well,
and then just live forever. Yeah.
Yeah, the millennials, they never learned how to shoot. But speaking of the Bilderbergs, so it's underway in Lisbon now. And if you don't know about the Bilderberg Group, all the movers and shakers, hundreds of billionaires from all over the place. And they set the policy, and then, supposedly, before the first Arab oil embargo, there was a Bilderberg meeting, and they decided that gas would go up to $1 a gallon, and in a year it was up, and all of these things. So who's there? But the guy who, the head of OpenAI, the creator of ChatGPT. The CEOs of Pfizer, Microsoft, Goldman Sachs, and Stacey Abrams. I don't quite get the connection there, but all the world's movers and shakers. I'm sure the heads of Google are there, and Zuckerberg or somebody's there from Facebook. I don't know that they invited Elon Musk this year. Probably not, is my guess. You think Elon's there?
I bet he's there because they want to win him over. They either, let's face it, they have to assassinate Elon Musk or they have to co-opt him, right? So one way or the other. Or he's already co-opted. You saw who he named the CEO of Twitter, who was an executive in the World Economic Forum. I can't explain that at all.
Unless he flipped her. Well,
unless he flipped her or they flipped him.
Or they made him an offer he couldn't refuse.
Yeah. I mean,
maybe he ended up with the bumper of a Tesla in his bed.
Well, because think about it. They could go to him and they'd say, well, listen, Kennedys, this guy and this guy and this guy, that was us. We killed them all. Unless
we're going to
stop this. You stop this stuff right now. Yeah,
we got to censor ourselves here, John. Let's just say they wouldn't hesitate to terminate extreme prejudice and leave it at that. And they've done it before, and they'll do it again. But man, I couldn't make out what that Twitter thing was. unless it's like he had his new toy, he had his fill of it, and now he's got to get to Mars in a hurry. So forget it. Hey, so recession, we've been going over this. Leading indicators, pre-recession territory. Commercial real estate is in the pits and has no hope of ever recovering in our lifetimes. Home sales down 23% year to year, and Home Depot, it's like that's the really one of the companies that really excelled during the lockdowns during COVID, and that's reported some bad numbers. What's your take?
Well, there are a lot of things that are rolling over out there right now. So you named a lot of them. And then there's the leading economic indicators, which is a kind of a compilation of a bunch of indicators that tend to predict things going forward, like hours worked, for instance. If there are a lot more hours being worked this month, then that means paychecks are bigger next month and consumer spending is up, so you can use hours worked to predict those other things. And that index is a very good predictor of coming recessions, and it's flashing red right now. It says major recession coming. And so it's no surprise that somebody like Home Depot would be seeing less demand for things that are basically, in a lot of cases, optional, right? If you're going to redo your kitchen, you can do it this year or you can wait a year. And when you start being more and more nervous about your financial situation, it gets easier and easier to wait a year. So the home supply companies are sensitive in that way. So for Home Depot to see a big drop in earnings, were their revenues down too? I forget.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So anyhow, for them to have a bad quarter is another leading indicator. It means that that spending from the sectors that would normally buoy Home Depot will be weak in the next quarter, let's say. So I think by year end we're in a recession, and then we get back to that. Oh, they're tapering a Ponzi scheme thing. We would be basically shutting off the money spigot if the economy starts to turn over. And you'd see a lot of debt go bad. That commercial real estate thing is just, you saw Zell just died, right?
Right. Yeah. That was sad. Yeah.
Yeah. He's really just this down to earth guy who was right over and over again about the real estate cycle. He would build up this big portfolio of office buildings and warehouses and factories, and then he would sell them towards the peak. And then he would go on CNBC or wherever and say, yeah, things are headed down. I'm out of all my real estate now. And then it would work out. And then he would go back in at the bottom. And so he was doing interviews right up to the end when he was basically saying that same thing again. Yeah, I'm out. I'm a seller of real estate. He called today's society Weimar Republic. So he was as apocalyptic as he has ever been. And he's been right so many times in the past that I think we need to pay attention. And he says commercial real estate is a mess. So
I gotta believe he's right.
Yep, you do, based on the real stuff that's happening out there and the fact that he's been right so many times in the past. So commercial real estate is toast, it sounds like.
Yes. Yeah, I think you are correct, man. I really, I think he's right. I mean, that guy is one of the smartest guys, and he wrote a book. I mean, he was really, really talented and quite brilliant. So, hey, and you could never bet against him. He always had impeccable timing, that guy. Speaking of real estate, so New York City lost 5.3% of its population, almost 500,000 people since COVID, most of them heading south, all of them coming to Palm Beach County, Florida, where I am, which is why the place is so crowded now. And people still think that they're just coming here for the good weather, right?
Well, yeah, and it makes complete sense that people are leaving New York City now. It's very badly run, and it has these monstrous winters. I lived there for 10 years, and I can remember some walks from one place to another in Manhattan in the middle of winter that were just, they're etched in my memory as the most painful things. My skin is free anyhow. So it's no surprise that people are leaving New York City, and it's no surprise they're going to Florida, because that's the normal kind of underground railroad thing they've got going, where they ship their retirees down to Florida. So the big question is, can Florida stay a free state if it imports 10 million New Yorkers? And I think the jury's still out. Yeah.
What I think is that it will, because the people who come here are probably more conservative, I guess, than those who are staying there, because Florida has become more red than ever. So my guess is probably it will stay that way, but I wouldn't put it past them. You never know. So it's just an interesting phenomena there. Hey, so what about this? China springs their debt trap on a dozen countries. They're like coming out of our playbook. It's like Pakistan, Kenya, Zambia, Laos, Mongolia. They're all in hock to the Chinese. They owe them billions and billions for often substandard infrastructure that was part of the Belt and Road Initiative. And China is not so friendly as the U.S., the Japanese, and others. I just wonder if we're going to see a new round of Chinese gunboat diplomacy.
Well, we weren't very friendly when we were doing that stuff. Remember that book, The Confessions of an Economic Hitman?
Yeah.
Yeah, that what the U.S. used to do, according to him, was they would go in to some banana republic and talk to the dictator and say, hey, we'll help you build this airport and we'll finance it and everything, and you can pocket 1/3 of what we give you and everything. And then so they go ahead and they do it, and then the airport doesn't generate enough cash to cover the resulting loans, and then the U.S. gets to go in and just take those assets. Well, China's kind of doing the same thing now. They were doing it with a happy face for a long time, where it was, we're never going to invade you or anything. We don't have anything like the CIA, don't worry. But now they've made all these loans to all across Africa, right? China's by far the biggest economic force in Africa. But now they're starting to call the loans. Yeah. And when you call a loan that cannot be paid back, that means you get the collateral. So China is apparently going to be taking over a lot of infrastructure in the developing world. And, with all the political influence that implies. So, yeah, I hate to say I told you so to anybody out there, but you cannot trust empires to act in your best interest if you're a small country.
Hey, in fairness to China, I don't think they set out for this to happen. I think they really believe this Belt and Road Initiative was really going to be a major success. And, one of the reasons the United States became ascendant is because of trade routes through the Panama Canal, trade routes from the U.S. to Europe and to Asia. And it protected those trade routes for better than 100 years. So the Chinese answer to that was, hey, we're going to do the Belt and Road Initiative, and we'll pay off all these tin pot petty dictators. We'll build airports, we'll build, ports and everything else. Well, as it turned out, the quality of that infrastructure, not so good, not as good as ours. And then they became money losers because they weren't economically viable. And you know what bails out a economically unviable government investment over time, John?
What?
Inflation. All right. There's so many things that were built in the United States that were really worthless when they were built, but they were expensive. And as inflation proceeded ahead, it made the economic case for those assets more viable. Problem with China is they haven't even finished half these projects. And the projects they have finished have often been substandard and just not capable of generating the return. And give the example, a lot of this was just means of getting capital out of China by private individuals because there was no legal way to do it. But when you have a money-losing project that you have to keep subsidizing, then the money just flows pretty much unrestricted. And this is the upshot of it. Now, whether we'll, the United States many times invaded countries because they weren't going to pay us, especially in South America, Costa Rica. The term banana republic came from that. I wonder, one day we just invaded Nicaragua because they wanted to expropriate U.S. fruits, banana trees, right? They just didn't like the idea of what's now Chiquita, I believe. U.S. fruit is Chiquita International. So I think we're in a new round of banana republics here, but they don't have any bananas to send, right, to China.
Well, they've got a lot of other stuff like bauxite and what's the thing in cobalt in
Cobalt in
the Dominican Republic. Oh, no, the Congo. Yeah,
Congo
or Dominic. No, not Dominica. Yeah, okay, Congo.
But you can only send miners to mine it. But miners with an OR, not an ER, John.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Those videos of the child labor,
horrible,
child slave laborers, as far as the eye can see, so we can have cheap electric cars. Yeah, that's
miners with. When they say miners in cobalt mining, they mean MINOR. Not ER.
Mm-hmm.
God.
Yeah.
What a world.
Really, what a world. There's a long list of stuff we're going to have to answer for. And that's one of them. The idea that our green technology requires something like that to be created, and we still think of it as green, means we never really cared about the environment. We just wanted cool stuff at any price.
Yep. That's it. Well, hey, the end justifies the means, and that's where we're at now. And you can't blame other countries for following that business model. It propelled the U.S. to where it is today. But the past is not so rosy. A lot of people died, a lot of exploitation, a lot of suffering. And hey, I'm not bashing the country, but you have to understand the history of exploitation that carries on to this day, right?
Oh yeah, it's not the past. It's currently going on, a lot of this stuff. You look at factory farming or most of the extractive industries that are springing up around clean tech, and it's as bad as anything we ever did. So yeah.
That's too bad. The world couldn't have learned the lesson, and they don't teach us this history. Not in our schools, not in any schools. Even in the countries we conquered, in the Philippines, in Haiti, in Costa Rica, in Honduras, they don't teach this history. They don't, and therefore we keep repeating. Anyway, I don't want to get into the whole anti-Americanism, but we have to acknowledge it worked, but at what cost? And to continue this model onward, this is not going to work. In any event, that is it. We've run over, but make sure you go to John's Substack. It's RubinoSubstack.com. The link is in the show notes of this interview. Hey, our site, Financial Survival Network. Make sure you sign up for your free newsletter that I'm sending out shortly. And John, we will catch up with you next 2 weeks.
Okay. See you, Kerry.